Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and what I wanted to do today was talk a little bit about CitizenCon and kind of go through what my predictions are for what we're going to actually see in the big presentation coming on October 9th. Now, this is all just speculation on my point, but it really is kind of just taking the information that we've gotten from CIG along with some things that we know are in development and kind of just extrapolating that into what I'm kind of hoping to see and what I think we are likely to see. So let's go ahead and start off. We know one of the things that's right around the corner is 2.6, and one of the big updates in that's going to be Star Marine. So I'm kind of expecting for us to get maybe like interviews with the development team that's actually been working on the simulation, and maybe an update on the progress for what things that they've actually completed, so we can actually continue to see the progress that they've made. Now, I think what we may end up seeing, if all things are going well, would probably be like a demo of like a live match that's actually taking place among some of the developers and artists and QA people that are actually attending and sitting at the computers there at the actual event. You know, kind of similar to what we saw at the Gamescom presentation, where we had them go through and demo 3.0 live for us. I'm kind of expecting to see an actual live match being played on stage, giving us our first true look at what the arena is going to look like, what the combat's going to look like, and some of the changes to like motion and the eye tracking and everything like that. And finally, CIG isn't really doing dates anymore, but I wouldn't be surprised if we at least get kind of an estimate, you know, a ballpark on when we're expecting to see 2.6 going live. You know, maybe something like saying it's going to be hitting Ivacati test flight in the first, you know, the following week after the presentation, or some kind of estimate on when we might see progress there. Now, it's technically possible that we get 2.6 prior to that point, and maybe it's in the hands of the Ivacati, but I seriously doubt it based on the amount of time we have left prior to that presentation, so it wouldn't be surprising if it has some big announcement that it's going to be going to PTU for players to really test it, so we start moving forward on that. As far as 2.6 go, we also know that there's going to be some new ships that are going to be at least hangar ready. So that's going to be probably the Caterpillar and the Herald. We've already seen a lot of progress kind of being passed along through ATV and RTV and 10 for the Chairman and all that good stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing kind of an in-hangar or in-engine tour of both of these ships. You know, we've seen some nice videos at Gamescom, you know, specifically about like the Argo, for example. I would expect to see something like that for the Caterpillar and the Herald, not only just to show us what's actually coming in the progress that they've made, as well as interviews with the development team, and maybe that's something they end up doing live. You know, the people that are actually working on those ships are going to showcase it for people. Now, we don't really know how far along they are, but I'm pretty confident at this point that the Caterpillar and the Herald are pretty far along, and new ships are always kind of a big seller at these events. It's kind of one of the things that everybody wants to see. So I would kind of expect that we get a little bit more information and hopefully something in engine that actually shows us how far along they've come with those ships. Now, speaking of new ships, I think the one that most people are most excited about is going to be the RSI Polaris. You know, it's the Corvette that actually is replacing what the Idris outgrew. So I'm hoping, and this is partially just because I've got a lot of interest in this ship, is for clarification on what the ship's role is actually going to be. When we start talking about a Corvette, there's a couple different ways that could go. You know, it could almost be like an area denial type of ship where it's got like a lot of turrets and flat cannons and those types of things. And it serves the purpose of keeping people away from your bigger ships or more important ships at the heart of your fleet by kind of creating a bubble of deterrence. The other way this could go is it could be a faster, smaller, type of capital ship, and it may have some decent forward-facing weaponry. Now, it's not going to have a big railgun on it like the Idris does, and it's not going to have something like the Super Dreadnought. But that doesn't mean it couldn't have several. Maybe a bank of, size 6 weapons up front, or, combined with some turrets, and it's actually more of an aggressor type of role. That Corvette role can go either way, and I would like to get more information on what that ship's loadout is going to be, as well as what the intended purpose of it is. And then I think what we're going to see is probably a concept sale tied to that Polaris. It kind of depends on how far the concept team has come with it, but I think that's probably the big release, and I think that's the big one that would be the ship sale that kind of is being kept hush-hush at this point, and I think it would be really interesting for everybody to see. Speaking of Hush Hush, Squadron 42, it seems like we get a lot of information, and we also simultaneously don't get a lot of information about it because they're really cautious not to spoil anything. So hopefully what we see with Squadron 42 is maybe an update on the progress. Them saying we're done filming or we're in production, like those types of status updates, giving us an idea of how far along they are. Now, they're not going to give us a date for release. At least I'm about 98% certain on that because I think at this point they've learned their lesson as far as giving dates go. But maybe what we see is a quarterly estimate. So maybe they say we're expecting to have Squadron 42 out in the first quarter of 2017, again giving us that January through March estimate. And then finally with Squadron 42, hopefully what we see is a new trailer, kind of giving us a further idea of either the storyline or the type of role that we're going to be taking on. Because what we've seen so far is the Admiral Bishop speech that gives us kind of a backstory, kind of leading up to where the campaign's going to start. And we've seen the Morrow tour kind of giving us an idea of maybe how we're going to start our personal campaign. But I don't think we necessarily know exactly what we're going to personally be doing in the fleet. And I think getting a little bit more information there may be interesting. How we're going to interact with the old man, for example. Those types of things would be really cool to see, and I wouldn't be surprised because I think at this point we're getting so close to when they said it was supposed to be released that they almost need to give us more information on it. User interface updates, I think, is another category that we're probably going to see some more information on. One of those is going to be in the form of the conceptual interactions with objects that we've seen. We saw some of that during Gamescom, where you're looking down at a cup and you can drink it or you can pass it, those types of things. Hopefully we get to see more fleshed out examples like, running up to a ship and getting into the back seat instead of the front seat, or kind of running up instead of walking up. Like those different types of conceptual interactions are going to make for a more immersive environment, and seeing how that's actually going to play out in the engine would be really interesting. And then I'm hoping we also get to see new information on the navigational pane. Roberts kind of glazed over it just a little bit in the Gamescom presentation, where we actually had kind of the system, I guess the orbital of the system that we're in Stanton, with the different destinations that are there. Roberts has also said that he hates the way that the quantum interface is today because it's cluttered and kind of busy. So I think being able to see how that's actually going to come to fruition and how we're going to interact with the environment would be really cool to see. And then kind of leading into that, I'm hoping that we also get some information on 3.0 and the progress that they've made. For example, maybe showcasing, the size of the system, kind of flying around and showing the scale, how long it's going to take to travel from point to point, what that does to your quantum fuel capacity, because I think that's going to really be the first thing that's going to start showcasing the different ranges that these ships have, and that's a big perk and something that we need to kind of get some more information on. I'm expecting interviews with the developers and the artists that are creating things. Hopefully we get to see some of the planetary procedural generation pieces that they've talked about. Roberts had this two-part interview that just came out with Gamer Nexus, where they kind of talk about building a planet and the brush strokes and the level of detail and all of that sort of stuff. So hopefully we get a little bit more information of that. I think the thing that we all really want to hear about is Star Engine, and as well as the netcode rehash that they're going to be going through. So hopefully we get some updates on how well the system's performing, how that new netcode is progressing, and what they've done to really test it at this point. Because I'm not sure how big that QA team is internally. So I'm curious as how far along they've been able to really test that and what they're doing with it today. And then I think just getting general updates on anything else that's going to be in 3.0 and kind of a further demo. Now, Gamescom was a really good demonstration of what that environment's going to be like, so I don't think we need to spend another 45 minutes seeing that. But getting some of the different imagery, maybe like ArcCorp, for example, or we've seen ArcCorp, but maybe more information on Crusader, some of the different places that we can actually land on different planets and different moons, and maybe some planetary stuff where you're actually driving an Ursa rover around, or the Dragonfly. Like all of that stuff is going to be the things that really bring more immersion and more life to our environment. I think there's a lot of cool things they could showcase for us to give us an idea of what's actually coming. So those are kind of my speculations on what we're going to see, or at least what I'm hoping to see. If there's anything else you think I missed, or any expectations that you have, please put them in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for more content coming your way soon. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.